Welcome, everyone, and good morning. Thanks very much for getting here so early. Thanks especially to those of you that are online for your patience in waiting while we got sorted out here at the Guildhall. Quite big queues out front, as everybody in the room is aware. But well done, those of you that were here for 9. My name's Steve Kenzie. I'm the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network in the UK. I want to make a particular note to welcome those of you that are joining us online. We really appreciate your participation. For those of you here in the Guildhall, it's always, I find it always a great pleasure to come into this august building. The gravitas of the building itself, I think, lends real weight to the discussions and the conversations that we're having. And they are also, of just such critical importance. A lot of history has gone through these halls, and maybe we'll make some more today. Maybe a partnership is going to form that's going to lead to great things. So please do strive for that. Today's event is co-hosted by 2 organizations, UN Global Compact Network UK and the Science Based Targets Initiative. We come together with a shared belief that the private sector is not just a crucial stakeholder in the transformation to net zero, but also a powerful engine for accelerating it. And so, again, we want to make that real. The Science Based Targets Initiative, aka SBTi, enables companies and financial institutions around the world to align with the latest climate science. Of course, that's a moving target, a rapidly moving target, but there's no better institution to help you stay abreast of really what science demands that we do. The SBTi plays a vital role in translating that science into actionable insights and ambition, and then into accountability. And I think that's really critical. There were emissions reduction targets before the SBTi, and we all know just how much value they had. Often not very much at all. The credibility that the SBTi brings is invaluable, and I think for those of you that have made the commitment, you'll understand that fully, and those of you that have not, that are trying to justify your emissions reduction targets to your investors and other stakeholders may recognize the value of SBTi as well. The UN Global Compact is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. We've got 25,000 companies participating globally. They have committed to a set of universal principles for responsible business, and the CEOs have committed to operationalizing those principles through everything that they do. Here in the UK, our network organizes a wide range of programming to help our members, our participants, fulfill the commitments that they've made when they join the Global Compact. Our 3 pillars of our strategy are to inspire ambition, to enable action, and to shape the environment for sustainable business. And today's theme is ambition to action. And Climate Week is a lot about ambition. Science-based target, key is in the target, is about ambition. But it can't stop there. And we really want to use today's session to help showcase some fabulous examples of companies that are moving from ambition to action and really making the change that we have. Now, before we get stuck into the program, just a teensy bit of housekeeping. No fire alarms are planned, so if an alarm goes off, head for the doors, up these stairs or over there, and there are also toilets in those directions as well. No breaks are planned, so we're all adults here. You know what to do. Okay, and now then, to get us started. I think one of the most important aspects of today's session is to introduce David Kennedy, the relatively new Chief Executive Officer of the Science Based Targets Initiative. David's, I'm sure, no stranger to most of you, having, I'm making an assumption from your accent, but I think you are a Londoner, so many of you will already know David probably for many years. He brings with him decades of experience at the forefront of sustainability transformation, a remarkable record of leading progressive, complex organizations to deliver impact. we're all delighted to have you at the head of the SBTi and looking forward to great things. And it's my pleasure to hand over to you now.
Right, okay. What a great introduction from Steve. Apart from, I am a proud son of Manchester, not London, Steve. But thank you. And good morning to everyone, and thanks for bearing with us. Many of you will know there's quite a queue to get in, and we didn't want to start with a half-empty room. So here we are. We've got a great morning. We've got a couple of panels of very interesting people who will share their experience on ambition to action, but I am going to offer a few reflections. You said I'm reasonably new. I am about 90 days into the job, so for anyone who knows that Harvard Business School book, 90 days, the first 90 days for a new leader, it's about that time where I should be having a sense of where I want to go with the team at the organization and with our partners, both in business and in the ecosystem supporting net zero transition. So I'm going to start with, why did I join SBTi? And I think what a wonderful organization that has surpassed everybody's expectations. So I think if you go back a few years, it was small. The ambition was work with maybe 500 companies. We now work with 10,000 companies. Amazing. And we're here in the UK. UK, obviously, as a leader in climate change, and in a previous role, I worked with my team, and we designed the UK's carbon framework. Subsequent to that, I know a load of corporates in the UK have joined SBTi. I've worked with many of them, again, in a previous career, and I know how much focus SBTi gives those companies in terms of developing their net zero strategy, their planning, and moving to action. But we're a global organization. So there's 10,000 companies. We've got 1,000 companies in the US. We've got about 5,000 companies here in the UK and Europe, and then we've got 4,000, so a real growing operation in Asia, really important in terms of carbon footprint and the impact we can have there. And that's why I've joined SBTi. We are a great success story, but I think we will have a huge impact going forward as well. The other figure I should give you, we cover, I think, about 40% of global market capitalization as well. Now, I spent the first 90 days listening and learning, talking to as many people as possible, and I will share a bit of what I've seen and a bit of what I've heard. So what I've seen in terms of internally to the organization is great people, first of all. And you would expect that everybody at SBTi is passionate and committed, but the capability in terms of the professionalism, the expertise, has been very impressive to me. We were only established as an independent organization last year, but we're already well-functioning and beyond what I would have expected before I came in. And really important in terms of customer service, we're a pretty impressive customer service organization. And you might not always have thought that, depending when you got your targets validated, but we've made huge leaps forward in terms of efficiencies, digitization, expanding capacity, improving the interactions between SBTi and businesses. And that's really important, given that a key partner for us is business. That is how we have our impact. So that's what I've seen internally. What I've heard from business, and I've talked with businesses across sectors, across geographies in the US, in Europe, in the UK, in Asia, and I get a consistent message, and that consistent message is, we need SBTi. We want SBTi to succeed, and we want to work with you towards that success. And we need SBTi to evolve the approach as we move from setting ambition towards action. So 3 key positive messages that I get consistently from businesses, as I say, across sectors and across geographies as well. Now, the other thing I get from business is, again, really important, the business case remains strong. And what they say is, well, the comms approach actually may have changed. Being above the radar, particularly if you're in the US, is maybe not the right thing to do at the moment. But the business case remains strong, and it remains strong for a number of reasons. You know, one, we've got increasing climate risk that is increasingly visible in terms of wildfires and droughts and floods, and that will get worse. we've got an international agreement which, even without the US, covers the vast majority of emissions and has a good deal of momentum. And then we've got developing frameworks in many countries around the world in the different regions that are incentivizing and supporting companies to act. And that is why the business case remains strong. You know, most companies, if you are here representing a company, you will have done TCFD. You know your transition risk. You know that if you don't do anything in a carbon-constrained world, your costs will go up. You'll find it hard to attract talent, and your revenues will go down. You know, that is the risk that you are trying to manage, and you manage that through reducing your carbon footprint, through signing up with SBTi, and I think we are a key pillar in that transition risk, through to action in a way that will keep your business competitive, not just now, but in the future, in a world that is going to be very different in 10, 15, and 20 years' time. So that is the business case. It remains strong, and that's good, because if there isn't a business case, you know, businesses are not going to act to do the right thing, at least to the extent that we need. Now, turning back to, we need to evolve our approach. Let me give you a few ideas of the direction of travel, and these are early thoughts, so they will develop, and we will debate and we'll discuss them with our partners, whether that's in business or NGOs and that ecosystem of partners. So, first thing is, we need to be a partner to business who want to be on that net zero journey. The second thing is that we, of course, have to remain science-based. That is our USP. But we have to increasingly focus on action as well. We have to be pragmatic. And that word pragmatic scares some people, and it makes them think, well, are we going to depart from the science and sacrifice that in order to have impact? And the answer is no. So when I say pragmatic, I mean we need standards that are applicable to the many varying contexts that corporates find themselves in, whether that's different sectors, different countries, or you know, even if they've got different capital stocks in the same sector, in the same country, can we allow for that? So that is one example of pragmatism. Second example, what do you do if companies have made really serious efforts to reduce their emissions, but not quite met the targets that they've signed up to? Do we disengage from those kinds of companies? And I think the answer is no. It is better to engage with companies who are serious. And you know, there are many other examples. I mean, people set up, actually, a contest, and they say, well, on the one hand, you can be science-based, and on the other, you can do something that is commercially viable. And there's a choice between the two. And I think that's a false choice, actually. And there is a sweet spot where the science you translate through economics and technology lenses, and you find stuff that is feasible and cost-effective, and you are able to act on that basis. And again, if it was a choice between science and commercially viable, it's hard to see how we would move forward. It isn't a choice. We will find that sweet spot. So that is really important for us. We will be a listening, engaging organization, and we will play a leading role alongside other partners in the ecosystem who need to all be joined up. And I think it's fair to say we could be more joined up than we are, and that is not a criticism, but there is an opportunity there. So those are some of the key things in terms of direction of travel. Now, you may have noticed me hesitate, and this is one of the challenges of speaking without notes, that sometimes you forget things, and then you think, oh, I wish I'd said that. The killer thing about the business case, I should have told you, are numbers. And so if you look at what's coming through in terms of submissions for validation at SBTi, we had a record year in 2024. We were 100% up in 2024 on 2023. When you might have expected a drop-off in 2025, we are 30% up already in the first 5 months on what was a record year last year. So that's telling you something about the business case. I was talking to UN Global Compact. The sign-ups, the feedback that's coming to UN Global Compact says firms are doubling down. More firms are joining in this movement to net zero. So again, that just reinforces what I was saying on the business case. Now, jumping back to how are we going to evolve our approach? So I've said partnership with business, science, action-oriented, pragmatic, listening, engaging, working in partnership with other players in the ecosystem. You know, actually, we are already doing that. So you will all have seen although possibly not have read every detail of it as I have, the Corporate Net Zero Standard version 1 draft that was out for consultation. And a lot of what I've said is actually in there already. So I'm going to pick out a couple of things that I think are real steps forward in that respect. So first of all, we split scopes 1 and 2, and that's right because there's very different challenges in addressing scope 1 and scope 2. We've got an action-based approach to scope 2, which is around commit to power sector decarbonization. We've got action-based approaches in scope 3, and particularly goods and services, the focus being align your tier 1 largest suppliers with net zero. That is a lever that any company can pull. They can align their largest suppliers. Maybe harder to drive down the carbon footprint in the near term across your supply chain. I've got a link in there with transition planning, and a question, how are we going to firm that up? But I think that link with transition planning, given the focus on transition planning across the corporate space now, is absolutely appropriate. That's a key step towards action. We've got, and there was a lot of debate and discussion. Everybody knows, we shouldn't pretend it wasn't the case last year around what is the position on carbon credits. We've set out a balanced position on carbon credits in there. Again, for consultation, and that needs to be finalized. Key point I want to say is it's all about getting your own carbon footprint down, not buying your way out of this. So you can never have credits being a substitute to reducing your own carbon footprint. You can have it as being a complement. So that's some key elements and positives of the Corporate Net Zero Standard. And where we are with that, so we've had the consultation, that closed at the beginning of June. We've got a great response. We had about 1,000 responses to it. We're going very carefully through those and systematizing what the feedback is. We've also got the expert working groups and different channels that we're engaging with the whole range of stakeholders. So we are now in a period of reflection. We're going to update and have a new draft, which we will consult on again after the summer. That will be a short consultation, but I think we will move on quite significantly between what you've seen and what we'll put on out after the summer. We will aim to launch that standard at the end of the first quarter next year, so watch this space. I think the other thing I want to highlight and draw your attention to, financial institutions, really important enablers of the transition. And I'm very proud of where we've got to with our financial institution standard. We've worked closely with a whole range of players to get to a very good place, and that will be launched in the next several weeks or so. So again, I think that will be a big step forward as well. I'm going to finish by saying, look, this is a chance in London Climate Action Week. There's quite a lot of negativity around. I think it's a chance to feel positive. I think it's a chance to celebrate what we've done, what we've achieved, and I don't just mean SBTi, I mean this whole community where there is a lot of action, a lot of achievement of which everybody can be proud. So I think it's a chance to celebrate. It's a chance to redouble our efforts. And I'll leave you with a message that is about SBTi. So for those companies that are ready to submit for validation, please do not hesitate. I think some people have said to me, well, should we wait for version 2 of the Corporate Net Zero Standard to come out? And I think the answer is no. You should submit for validation now. You should get a validated target under version 1. That will set you up very well to be on the path without delay, get your company focused, doing stuff. It will set you up very well to then, at the end of the cycle, have a version 2 target. And for those of you who already have a target, and that's the 7,500 of the 10,000 companies do have a validated target. The other 2,500 have commitments which should turn into targets over the next year or so. So if you have a target, my message is, look, stay the course. I know a lot of people are nervous and they're thinking, well, what if I don't meet my target? Am I going to be shamed? No, we're not in the shaming business. Can I work with SBTi going forward? What value are they to me on that journey? We will develop an approach that is of great value, supporting everybody who is serious on this net zero transition. So please stay the course. If you're not with us, please act now. If you are with us, stay the course. You are important partners. We want to keep you. We will hopefully get you signed up under version 2 as you get to your 2030 target for the next cycle. So I am going to leave it there. I hope you got a sense that it's been a very positive experience for me in the first 90 days. I am very optimistic and excited about the role of SBTi, working with others on this net zero transition. The business case remains strong. That is going to lead to action, and we will play our role, as will all of you. I think I'll hand back to Steve, who is going to bring on the panel. But thank you for being here, and I hope we have a great morning.
Thanks, David. Anna and panelists, if you would like to start coming up, I'll say a few words while you're getting settled. You'd think that a Canadian who's constantly being mistaken for an American would be more sensitive about accents, so I beg your pardon to all non-Londoners. Thanks, David, for that fantastic introduction. I think you've given us all some really valuable ammunition to push back against those that want us to believe in an ESG backlash, and that positivity is most welcome. And your principled pragmatism equally welcomed. We look forward to working with you on the launch of the new standards and helping to get those rolled out and adopted. A fantastic panel before you, and I'm going to leave you in Anna's good hands.
Thank you so much, Steve. Can you hear me? Perfect. Great. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you in this beautiful venue. Thanks very much to the UN Global Compact Network UK and to the Science Based Targets Initiative for bringing us all together this morning for what I'm sure will be some really interesting conversations. And thank you to Steve and to David for teeing this up so nicely. So my name is Anna Torrell. I'm the former Chief Sustainability Officer at Decathlon. Before that, I led sustainability at Tesco and Nestle and did other various things. And I'm a relatively new board member to the SBTi. And I joined the board of SBTi earlier this year for one primary reason, which is because having gone through the SBTi kind of process, having set ambitious climate targets and net zero commitments, I know firsthand how powerful they are when you start to embed and operationalize them across business. And I really do strongly believe that the SBTi is really the greatest gift we have as companies today in helping to support us on our climate journeys. From board buy-in to how we actually engage and mobilize action across our businesses. So, as David mentioned, we are in a particularly funny moment, I guess, in kind of for the broader sustainability and societal kind of agenda as it relates to environment and social issues. But we're not seeing a loss of momentum. If anything, we're seeing greater traction, greater mobilization. And what you're going to hear this morning in the next 35, 40 minutes is some examples from leading companies who have gone on that journey. What's worked, what's been more challenging, and actually how it's all going. So hopefully you will find this kind of either inspiring or energizing, and it might even raise some questions for you. Unfortunately, because we're a little bit tight on time, so we're not going to have the opportunity to do a live Q&A. However, I would invite you to accost these excellent panelists in the breaks if you have any specific questions. So, without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce my wonderful panel, and then we're going to dive in. So we have, to my left, we have Simon Hensel-Thomas, who's the Global Director of Climate and Nature at the Inca Group, so IKEA, for those of you not familiar with Inca. We have Lina Sierpa, Head of Corporate Sustainability and ESG at AP Moller Maersk. We have Sonia Themaya, hopefully I got that right, Senior Director of Global Sustainability at Heineken. And we have Peter Lukesen, Director of Sustainability at Bosch. So we have a brilliant, brilliant panel. So please just round of applause for our brilliant panel. Right. If I may, let's dive straight in. Why do we set targets? You know, what is it? Why do we set these big, ambitious, science-based targets? And in your respective companies, what's been the business case for establishing those targets? Maybe we'll go down the line and we'll start with you, Simon.
Super. Thanks, Anna. Morning, everyone. Lovely to share a stage with you.
Likewise.
Nice to be here. Like Anna said, I work for Inca Group, which is IKEA. Sort of 9/10 of the stores, IKEA stores in the world are run by Inca Group. We've also got a shopping centre business and an investment arm. So it just gives a bit of scoping. I think maybe why do we act on climate? We act, David, you said it's the right thing to do, and it's partly that. It's the right thing to do, but we also act because we see that our customers and our co-workers are demanding it. So we regularly survey our customers especially, and we find that 2/3 of them are really passionate about climate. They care, they're worried, and they expect a company like IKEA to act. So I think that's a big driver for us, but one of the biggest drivers also is that we see this as the business model of the future. So David, you talked about the business case. For IKEA, we want to be on the right side of the climate transition. We want to act now so that we're ahead of the game, and we see this absolutely as a business opportunity, and the converse of that is that it's a massive risk. So if you ask why do we set a goal, we set a goal because it's the right thing to do, but also because we don't want to be left behind. We want to be a leader in climate change action. And for me, and for us, SBTi is the only science-based tool in town. So we had a commitment to Paris to 1.5 degrees. The only way for us in our mind to operationalize that commitment is to say that we'll set an SBTi goal that is in line with science, and we know that we're making our contribution. So I think there was a values part to it there. We felt we should lean in. There was also a brand part, which is to say, of course, we want to be credible. If you're a leader, you need to be credible. And to us, SBTi are the most important show. And I think just to emphasize what David said, SBTi cannot be allowed to fail. SBTi have to survive and thrive because they are the most important organization. SBTi will define value chains of the future through the standards that they set. The business world will respond. So for us, this was about IKEA and our goal, but also changing society as well.
Great, super powerful. Lena, does that resonate with you and Maersk?
Absolutely. I think I'm already going to start repeating what has been said. So Maersk, for those of you who may not know, is a global shipping and logistics company. So what's particular for us is shipping, of course, makes up the majority of our very, very large climate footprint. We are a heavy emitter, and shipping is a hard-to-abate sector. So I think that's the most particular thing to note from Maersk's side. But the business case for us and the drivers for us to set a standard are, again, mirroring what has been said already, also by David, that this is about recognizing our responsibility. We're part of the solution or part of the problem, and so we need to be part of the solution as well. But equally, it's a potential risk, right? It's a strategic risk, transition risk. We want to future-proof our business to get ahead of regulation that is now coming in, that is in place from the EU, that's coming from the International Maritime Organization, which is super positive, which we advocate for very strongly because we want to see a global playing field. But it's also about, this is important to our customers, and there's a business case for us in being able to support our customers in decarbonizing their supply chains. So it's really that combination, which is very strong. And indeed, finally, not least also the employee side. People are proud to work for us because of our leadership on climate.
Great, thank you. And we certainly see that, and it was reflected in the earlier notes, comments regarding this kind of generational shift that we're also seeing, increasing expectation from younger generations that want to work for companies that they feel proud about and that have ambitious sustainability and climate goals. Sonia, how does that work for Heineken?
I'll try not to repeat, but the danger is I probably will. One of the great things about working for Heineken is I think I don't need to tell you what we do, but we are the most international brewer. We have about 180 breweries across 70 countries, and we sell our products in about 190 of them. So as well as beer, we do make wine, spirits, soft drinks, and seltzers. We also have our full suite of carbon goals validated by the SBTi as recently as 2022, and we think it's a really powerful tool. And the why did we do it? Firstly, we did it because it provides this really valuable North Star to help guide the organization as to where do we need to act, what's really material for us as a business. And really for us, it was about clarity of intent, clarity of the ambition for the extent to which we want to decarbonize and by when. But also, it was a great tool to mobilize and engage the business to say, okay, what are the pragmatic, practical things we can do to deliver the goals now that we have them? And from a business case perspective, we really hook what we do on the sustainability and on the carbon side to what does this mean for us commercially as well? Yeah, it's really, I know a lot of companies say it's part of core business, but we really think about it. And for us, it's about resilience and it's also about opportunity. Like someone mentioned, we have done our TCFD analysis, so we know our climate risks. Climate taxation and pricing is the number one. And one of the things we did in our business as part of bringing the business on the journey is we did look at the cost of action versus the cost of inaction. And it's really interesting what you see. So there's a few no-brainers. Energy efficiency, better operating costs. Lower carbon emissions, less carbon taxes. And for us, given our international footprint, by getting access to renewables, it's really helped us build energy security in some really critical places. And it's not just scope 1 and 2. If we look at scope 3, for us, one of the big opportunities is around reuse. So moving from one-way bottles to more returnable bottles, which we refill and we bring back in. And that reduces our carbon by about 70%. But guess what? It's a huge productivity play. We buy less glass bottles, which are heavy and they are expensive. So there are commercial benefits, and it's about putting that together to put a bit of the why. But really, I think it comes back to recognizing the role we want to play given some of what's happening on the external world. But it comes back to that clarity of intent, but also really thinking about how do we get the credibility with SBTi, but that signal to employees. When we speak to our employees and also people who want to join the company, it's one of the top reasons. Not just carbon, but the full sustainability agenda. They want to work for a company they're proud of. So that is definitely part of the dynamic too.
Perfect. Thank you, Sonia. And finally, Peter, just tell us a little bit about the business case for Bosch.
Well, with Bosch, we are a big, awesome multinational company, and we are basically active in all kind of different fields. And a lot of them, especially the automotive and the industry, they are also very cost sensitive. So it's a highly competitive environment. But because of that, we had been one of the first companies to join SBTi 5 years ago, because we knew that you have to have, first of all, a clear science-based target to make climate action happen. And we have seen that to go on this journey, it really helps to provide transparency. And based on this transparency, being an industrial company, we are very, very experienced in making something out of an ambition and build some systems and really deliver results. And we just have been re-evaluated. And after 5 years, I can tell it was really worth the effort. So we have now a target to reduce our scope 3 by 30% until 2030, and we have already realized 27%. That's more than 100 million tons of CO2 per year. We have reduced our scope 1 and 2 by 84% since 2018, and there are some clear benefits out of it, and already mentioned. So it's a cost benefit which you have. So it's, in the meantime, it's a business case. It's already a positive business case for us after 5 years, and there are even a lot more important intangible benefits, which already also has been mentioned. You have more resilient relationships with your stakeholders, and you have also a lot better hold on the existing employees, and also the better attraction for new ones. And then the other side to this coin is we are now on this road, and we can see some results, tangible and intangible. But then again, looking outwards, looking to the future, we are moving to a low carbon world. And in this low carbon world, climate action and the footprint will be as important as quality to your products. And you cannot just wait for the legislator to ask you to do something. You have to start with product design. You have to rethink your value creation and your efficiency. And if you do not start early with this, you are losing the competitive edge, which I think no company should just miss out to stay ahead of the curve. And I can clearly say, and only also tell all the other companies, it is worth the effort. Start with having this North Star, having these targets, and then you will step by step realize where your footprint is and where your hotspots are, and you will find the marginal abatement cost curves and have some really quick first wins, and this gets also the whole organization moving. And this is the other thing, it is an organizational movement. It's not just a chapter in your management report. It's about doing business differently, and then you will really be able to also earn the results at the end.
Brilliant, thank you so much. If we have any companies in the room that were on the fence about setting science-based targets, I feel like this is a pretty compelling case for why you should jump in. Just to be a little left field, I just want to throw a question at all of you regarding board buy-in. Did anyone in the process of getting, of kind of convincing the business of the business case for setting science-based targets, did any of you have any challenges with the board, or was it a no-brainer? Open to anyone?
Yeah, I think maybe if we look to setting goals 15 years ago to now, then I think that the environment has changed. So, and I actually think it's a good thing, because when we set a goal now in IKEA, we want to achieve that goal and we want to operationalize it. Whereas I think when we set goals 15 years ago, it was about forcing change in society and giving a North Star. So I think there was a lot more scrutiny in our supervisory board and on our own board on not how exactly are you going to meet that goal, but can you give us some idea of your roadmaps and give us some idea of the business case, of course, but also what are some of the levers that are going to drive climate change and help us meet that goal. So I think they were all in with the why, but we needed to be much more clear on a bit on the how.
Nina?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can say that the board obviously rightly scrutinizes also target setting and the journey to reach the goal. As I said, especially when it comes to shipping, the maritime transportation standard, which of course was only launched in 22. Maersk, if you look a little bit back at the history here, already I think in 2019. We said publicly we wanted to set a science-based target. We had made in 2018 a net zero commitment as the first in the shipping industry, but also said at the time we did not know exactly how we were going to get there, but we knew we wanted to align to science. And so we also engaged very much with the SBTi in the development of the maritime standard. When it then came out in 22, we then also really dug into then how are we actually going to reach it. I think that was the critical piece for us. It's the target is actually given, you could say, by the methodology, but the challenge is really getting a clear baseline, getting a good inventory in place to understand, also to the point, where across the business are we actually going to accomplish this and reach our goal. And that's, of course, also then where you have the engagement with the board, with the executive team, with the business owners, the product owners around the organization. So at all levels, there's going to be, a need to actually really engage people, to talk to them about how this is, how we believe this is going to be possible, how we will engage to set at different levels, also on the regulatory front, with our customers, with our suppliers, to develop the solutions, right, the green fuels that we need, etc., and the vessels themselves to sail on them.
Great, thank you. Sonia, Peter, anything you want to add?
I think actually for us, there wasn't so much on the why. I think the why is pretty much done now, if I'm honest. A lot of it was exactly as you said, Simon, on the how, but also on the how much. What's the right number? What's the right number for our business? Do we just go with what science requires us to do, or do we go beyond? And so we made some really deliberate choices where we wanted to go beyond. So we have a goal for scope 1 and 2 to have 90% reduction by 2030. And that is ambitious, especially when you have 180 breweries. And we knew some of the answers because, as you said, we needed to have the action plans, we needed to have them costed out. We didn't have them all, though. But we wanted to set something that was ambitious as a way of driving innovation, as a way of trying to look for the right answers. So part of it for me was also getting the organization ready to deal with ambiguity. what does that actually look like? And our supervisory board are hugely supportive, but it was kind of going through that process of not the why, but much more of the what and the how, and what does this really mean for us?
Great, thank you. Peter?
I think what you mentioned about getting support from the board is very important for any big company, because in the end, that's where the power is. On the other hand, at least if I speak also for Bosch, it was never an issue to get support from the board. So initially, it was even really driven by our CEO in 2019 to join the Science-Based Target Initiative. And we established a sustainability board meeting. So twice a year, we only have sustainability topics on the board meeting. And we are seeing that from the board, but also from the divisional boards, the senior management, they are self-nominating themselves to be part of this. Because I see also in other conferences, and if I talk with the decision makers, they realize that there is this competitive edge and that we are in a transformational phase. So my message would be, don't be afraid of your board. Most probably they are in front of it in any case. So just go for it.
Just go for it. Love it. Right, we're going to talk about progress in a moment, but first, let's get uncomfortable. Let's talk about the challenges a little bit more. The challenges of how you actually operationalize and deliver your science-based targets. Because for those of us that have gone through it, we have the scars to prove it. So it would be really great if we can just hear a little bit about the journeys that you've gone on. And again, Simon, let's start with IKEA. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in operationalizing your targets, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, super good. Many challenges, as you know, Anna. I think maybe just a framing. So we've managed to reduce our climate footprint by 30% since the baseline, and that's against a backdrop of increasing sales by around 20%. So we are making good progress. What I notice is that a lot of that progress in the beginning tends to be low-hanging fruit. So you mentioned energy efficiency. It's an easy win. That feeds in. Renewable energy sourcing, that also feeds into that 30%. I think we're now into what I would call harder to abate, and the hill gets steeper. I think one of the biggest learnings is transitioning the sustainability team from being evangelists to solutionists. Because in the beginning, it's all about, guys, we need to take climate action. We need to set a goal. But the minute you need to operationalize that goal, you get into hardcore change management. And I think we then have questions around what is the competence within the team. Do we have change managers or do we have climate scientists? So I think that's been a really, really big learning on pivoting the team to really focusing on action and implementation. Something that's really helped with us is operationalizing the goal within business plans, because then the business needs to deliver that, not the sustainability team. We've also made our country managers, so when you're the head of IKEA in France, you're also the CSO in France. So giving that accountability and responsibility in the line organization. And one other thing we've done is we've set value creation goals where we say climate is at the same level as revenue. So when you report to the CEO at the end of the year, you need to talk about your revenue, your profit, your loss, and you also need to talk about your climate numbers. So some of those things are helping, but that is a journey and we're still on that road. But I think operationalizing the target, getting it into the veins of the organization, that's the job now.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And that resonates. When I was at Decathlon, we did something very similar and actually really targeted the finance function and embedded climate targets into the finance function, so that using training and capacity building, finance managers, wherever they were tracking both, the P&L, the bottom line, and performance against carbon, which is incredibly powerful because they often are the guardians of the data. So yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to steal that line from evangelists to solutionists. So thank you. Lena, tell us a little bit about the challenges of actually doing this within Maersk. And you've talked about, you are a hard to abate industry. This stuff is hard.
Yes.
How do you, bear with me, but how do you turn the tanker on climate? Sorry, it was bad, I know. I couldn't help it.
Not Not the tanker, but the container liner.
Well, yeah. Sorry, container.
But but I think just also to put some perspective on it, and again, I don't want to scare people, but Maersk is a very large global company, so bear in mind, very, very large, complex organization. But the process just to set the target, as I was mentioning before, in terms of setting this inventory, for example, right? So this involved getting an overview of 4 billion lines of data. It took, there were 6 FTEs involved over 4 months, and 40 stakeholders around the organization. So it's a massively complex exercise. But it also then allowed us to move to, we now have 85% of our scope 3, for example, with activity-based data, right? So getting a much granular understanding, actually, of our footprint is also one of the values of doing this complex exercise. What we also then try to do, because some of the challenges I said in terms have to do then with, to the point also of getting it to be something that is understood by people, that they can take ownership to around the organization. Specifically to the target, what we did was to, for example, to also try to translate it into product level, you say, targets, or communicated sort of to say, to reach our science-based target, how much does this mean in terms of the percentage of green fuel that we need to, that we expect to be able to, or need to procure, the green moves that we need to make across the organization. So in that way, translating into the language that resonates with the people who actually, in their daily business and daily decisions. And I think that's really important. And one of the very important, I would say also, changes that Maersk made a couple of years before then actually getting to set the specific target was we actually decided to embed the responsibility for decarbonization with a dedicated team embedded within the business. So it's really, to echo this point about it is about moving from being those evangelists. We still, some of us are absolutely evangelists, but there has to be a very pragmatic focus, an operational focus on creating the solutions within the organization and in the ecosystem beyond. Because I would say the main challenge that we still face is, of course, that we are critically dependent on the external ecosystem in terms of we need access to green fuels, green energy sources at scale. That is also hampered by geopolitical challenges, by inflation, by everything that's going on in the world. We're mentioned a couple of times regulation as well.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you heard as you were speaking the audible gasp from the room when you mentioned 4 billion data lines. Sonia, tell us a little bit about the challenges that Heineken has faced in implementing its targets.
So we didn't count our data lines, and now I'm really pleased we didn't. For us, I don't know how to say this, but setting targets, I hate to say it, is the easy bet. Operationalizing it and making it live and breathe is the hard bet. And there's 3 things I just want to give you a sense of to bring it to life. The first thing is we really need to establish the right foundations. And you've heard it from some of the people. It's about really embedding this in the business. I have a very small sustainability team. I like keeping it that way. So frankly, we had to be really clear about what are the roles and responsibilities, what's the governance around this. So we are really clear. We in corporate affairs, we act as orchestrators of the process, strategy, reporting, that kind of stuff. But the hardcore execution for how we decarbonize our breweries, scope 1 and 2, that's supply chain. How do we decarbonize scope 3 with our suppliers? That's procurement. Commerce, hugely important to have in the conversation, especially when we talk about things like reuse, because we're talking about changing our portfolio mix. What does that mean? And finance. I'm so glad you mentioned finance. One of the things I always say is make finance your best friend. And one of the reasons I say that is for the second piece, which is how do you fund the transition? And for us, it was about, this is the big elephant in the room a lot of the time. So the first thing was to have really detailed roadmaps. What are the technology levers? What are the organizational levers that you want to pull? But then costing them out and having that conversation with finance about how do you allocate the right funding and integrate it with your annual planning process, your strategic planning process, so you're doing both the short and the long term. And we also integrated it into our long-term incentive plans for our senior managers. So 25% of that LTIP, as we call it, is sustainability linked with 3 KPIs, one of which is carbon. And it's just a way of reinforcing the message and saying, actually, you know what, we need to have the right setup to do it. We need to be able to fund it. But the last thing in terms of complexity is, if you're going to decarbonize your value chain, you're working with lots of different actors at the risk of stating the obvious. Your suppliers, your customers, your consumers, and it's all about partnerships. Partnerships are absolutely key. We're not going to decarbonize and meet our goals on our own. So it's really about how you're very intentional in the partnerships that you need to have. So for us, Scope 3, there are 4 key things that make it up. It's packaging, it's agriculture, it's logistics, it's cooling. So we're really clear to our suppliers about what is it that we want them to do. We want them to set science-based targets. We want them to report on progress. We want them to move towards renewable electricity. But it's not just setting the expectation. It's the enabling factors. So we're part of something called SLOGs, which is a way of training up suppliers. And a lot of our over 70 of our suppliers have gone through it and have gone through the process of setting science-based targets. We have set up an alliance called Refresh for beverage suppliers, along with Coca-Cola, Diageo, and others, where really, pre-competitively, how do you look at providing a platform which allows our suppliers to access renewable energy? So, yeah, I think this isn't easy stuff, but we're not going to do it on our own, and we need to look at how do we partner with the right players within our ecosystem, but also outside to really get this to work. And a lot of the other challenges, the external challenges are really real. Regulation doesn't always work in our favor. So for us, if you look at it from our operational footprint, electricity, we kind of have the answers. We source 84% of our electricity is from renewable sources now through PPA, certificates, and other mechanisms that we use on site. But thermal heat is really hard. So how do you have the innovation to really help you drive that process? How do you partner to find it? So I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about partnerships, but that's also been really key.
Yeah, thank you. Collaboration is absolutely fundamental, and particularly for companies with complex global supply chains, even more so. And ultimately, climate is a pre-competitive issue, right? So fully agree with that. Peter, Bosch, tell us about your challenges in.
Yeah, and I can only add to that for us, exactly this is the topic. It's a Scope 3 upstream, because frankly speaking, Scope 1 and 2 was rather easy. So we have more than 200 locations globally, and with some residual compensations, we are carbon neutral in those 200 locations since 2020. So this was an easy first step. However, having tens of thousands of suppliers in all different areas, because we are basically supplying everything. We have suppliers from microelectronics to paper, from rubber to whatever. So this is the hard thing, because for most of them, we are not their biggest customers. So microelectronics, some chip manufacturer, he doesn't really care too much for the automotive industry, but how do you get your supply chain to decarbonize? And there our biggest lever in the end is that we also help our supply chain, first of all, to understand their footprint, because in the end, everything starts with transparency. So early on, we started to be one of the biggest promoter of CDP reporting. So this year, our target is to have 5,000 of our suppliers joining CDP reporting, and then once they have done this, to also set their own science-based targets. Another thousands of companies having science-based targets just means that throughout the supply chain, you get, on the one hand side, and this is important, data, which you need for your own carbon footprint, because your supply chain is not only part of your footprint, it's also part of your solution. This is very important. So you get the data, and we can see, and this is one of the big driver of our reduction over the last 5 years, once you have the companies joining on this road, having the transparency, understanding their marginal abatement costs, they will reduce their footprint. And then, of course, you can just add to this, and we also have started, we will make the carbon footprint and according targets also part of our sourcing strategy. So companies which do not work on this, they can still offer something, but they will get a malus. So just also provide some tangible incentives and give just the example. We also have regular conventions with our suppliers, just organizing how to measure carbon footprint, what are some easy quick wins, how you can benefit from it. Just learn by, because this is about learning in the end, doing it together. No company alone can solve this issue. We have to work together in solutions, and this works quite perfectly because, as mentioned before, the top management of most customers, they are very, very well aware of it. And you have to just bring them together and then move in the right direction.
Great, thank you. Yes, Sonia.
Can I say something? Because Peter's just reminded me of something which I think is really important in terms of operationalization, which is ruthless prioritization, right? And I think one of the complexities of trying to decarbonize is it's so much. How do you eat an elephant, right? It's that huge thing, and the answer is one bite at a time. And you've mentioned a couple of times, you've got the marginal abatement cost curve, which is great, but we found that was just a starting point. Right, it gives you one insight, but we had to look at ease of implementation. We had to look at the regulatory context. You have to look at it at a very local level as to what works. It's not a case of one size fits all. You've got to look at the impact on local P&Ls. You know, really get the financials right. So the only other thing I would add is ruthless prioritization to realize that you don't have to do everything at once. You can phase delivery. So have plans that allow you to do that.
Great, thank you. Lena.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. So it's so important. And I think that also want to tie back to David's point about the pragmatic approach, because I think that is so important also looking ahead, that's really in focus also for the SBTi, but for all companies that want to continue on this journey, as we have here, representatives here on this panel.
And I think this is such a good point, and maybe just to inject my own view on this. It's often said that you can't let perfect be the enemy of the good, but it is so true when, as companies, you are trying to operationalize and deliver on these climate targets that are inherently dependent on so many other moving pieces. And it can be, and this is why I'm saying it and not inviting the panel, because I don't want to put you on the spot, but it can be incredibly frustrating when stakeholders in other spaces kind of critique how you are doing in tackling the climate crisis and delivering on your targets. Because to the points that we've heard, we have to navigate through a working business that is moving and being buttressed by headwinds such as regulatory shifts, such as commercial pressures, such as changing consumer demand, and you're constantly in a state of adaptation and movement. And so this broader change process that we are taking our organizations through is not being done in a vacuum. And it's really important, I think, to consider that, because if we lose sight of being pragmatic, practical, and prioritizing, and we go for that perfect shiny thing, then we run the risk of just failing in the process. Okay, I would like to just move us into a space of kind of the how it's going, the successes to date. But particularly, I'm going to ask you to a particularly framed question, because you are all corporate leaders. You have all been on this journey for a number of years, whether it's science-based targets or it's predating that. So I'd like to ask you personally and organizationally, if you knew what you know now, would you have done it differently when you first started out? We'll start with you, Simon.
I'm not going to sit next to you next time.
You can pass it. You can pass it back if you want.
I think just very quickly on the prioritization one. So 50% of the IKEA footprint is in materials. So honestly, if we solve that, we solve everything. 5% of the IKEA footprint is glue in our products. So when you break it up that way, I think it really... what would I do differently? I think, I mean, we've made good progress. Like I said, 30% reduction. I think I would probably have gone quicker earlier with operationalizing. I think there was a tendency maybe that we waited too much for perfect data. So one example is in our non-product procurement, where we're making good progress. But there we're waiting for better data because we have a spend-based data methodology. And I think there we could probably have moved to action quicker, because we know what the big levers are. It's steel, it's concrete, it's the big high-emitting sectors. So I think maybe moving quicker on the big categories first, rather than waiting for the perfect data, would be one. I think IKEA's invested 4 billion in renewable electricity now through Inca investments, which is a lot of that is not going back into the IKEA value chain. So we're actually a medium-sized energy company now, and we've committed to 7.5 billion by 2030. I think we have more wind farms than stores. I think if I could do that differently now, I would maybe connect. What we're now trying to do is connect that back into the IKEA value chain. So we're 98% renewable electricity right now, but a lot of that doesn't come from IKEA wind farms. So how do we move from more a market-based accounting to a location-based? And you see some of the big tech companies doing that now with 24/7 accounting. So I think making that connection with our assets and bringing that back into the IKEA value chain would be another one.
Great.
I see a red number there, but I think
Thank you.
that's for us.
No, I think we're good. I've got a timer as well. All right, Lena.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think this has been a constant learning journey for us, right? So I don't think that when I look back, I said, would we have done things differently? I think it's a difficult question, actually, because we've learned so much on the way. And of course, with all the knowledge that we have now, it's a little bit unfair to say, right, that we would then have done things differently, because at every stage we kind of take learnings with us and then we adjust. So as I said, in 2018 we thought the big problem was going to be, what are the technologies that are going to get us to zero? We found out that was not the problem. The technologies were there, so that's one example. And then we move on to other challenges. Now there are actually vessels sailing on the water that can sail on the low emissions fuels, for example, and that's something that we're all immensely proud of. So I don't think it's possible to say we would have done it differently. I think we just have to build in that capacity to adjust and change along the way, and of course that then gets to the point where sometimes that's a challenge to be able to explain to external stakeholders that that's not stepping back in any way, that's progressing.
Great, thank you. Sonia.
Oh, what would I do differently? If I had a crystal ball back then, I think it's similar to Simon. I wish we'd acted sooner without perfect information. And I think, we took a lot of time to get the right information to understand where do we act, how do we act. And actually, some of what we're implementing now, we could probably have started a bit earlier. But the benefit of taking a bit of time means that you actually bring the organization with you as well. And so I think it's always that balancing act between how quickly can you act, do you have the right people aligned to do it? And actually technology for us is a really interesting piece, because technology hasn't moved as fast as we thought it would. And it's not as cost effective as we thought it would be by now. There's a lot of talk of hydrogen, not really happening. So, I think there's that balancing act that you have to play, which is how do you act with the best information that you have, while you're making progress, because that's the key thing for me. You've got to recognize that you want to keep making progress. But yeah, the one thing would be to act sooner.
Great, thank you. And finally, Peter.
Well, of course, if you look to the past, then there are always decisions or projects which haven't resulted in what you expected, and you could have done this differently. On the other hand, I wouldn't have done it really differently, because in the end, we allowed for a lot of enthusiasts also to act early and to act fast. And if you do this, then of course there's failure. But this is a really valuable learning experience. And it was already mentioned, don't wait for any perfect solutions. There will never be any perfect solutions. Just go on the journey and be open to the learning experience. And then you will have the results on the way. And don't get annoyed because something hasn't worked, because 80% has worked. And this is the results which in the end drive the organization. And again, be open for failure. This is an innovation process. And then you will drive the change.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. We're going to leave it there. I would like you to all give this brilliant panel another round of applause for their wonderful contributions.
Leave your microphone, please. Thank you. Thank you, Anna, Simon, Lena, Sonia, Peter. That was fantastic. It's always a pleasure to hear the real experiences of the people at the coalface, as much as you guys from your lofty perches are at the coalface. Lots there to take away. Evangelist to solutionist, I think, is a keeper for many of us. I think that feels really in line with our ambition to action theme for the day. So really like that a lot. Finance is your friend. Makes me think of Shark Tale. Was that fish are friends, not food? But that's an area that we're doing a lot of work as well. At the Global Compact Network, we're doing a series on engaging core functions in sustainability, making it more clear to your colleagues in procurement and finance and marketing and legal that sustainability is their friend as well and can help them achieve their goals. Next event in that series in September, if you want to know more about it. Please, next panel, Pendar and panelists, do please take your places. We still have all of our microphones. The backs of the chairs, I think. Our next panel, as you see on the board, I'll let Pendar introduce them, but we're going to be hearing from some financial institutions which are so essential, obviously, to the transition that we need to go through. Critical role to play for themselves in aligning their investment portfolios with ambitious climate goals, managing transition risk, and of course ensuring that capital is flowing where we need it to flow to enable this transition. Without any further ado, Pendar, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. It was already going to be a super exciting panel. It's become even more exciting by Denise trying to make it to London from Paris since last night, and she's about to come into the building. So she should hopefully be joining us right after that, which is fantastic. I'm very excited about this panel. So when we reflect on where we are now, 2025, SBTi is now 10 years old. In 2015, we had one company that had been validated by SBTi. In 2016, we had 7. Where we are now, we are 8,200 companies that have been validated by SBTi around the world, and another 3,000 further companies committed to set science-based targets, including 165 financial institutions, which are, some of them are the kind of the who's who of the financial services industry across 30 countries. But we are making progress everywhere. We started, I guess, with a big presence in Europe. We've kind of expanded a lot to Asia. I mean, Japan is our #1 country. China is supposed to be our 4th largest country in terms of target setting, which is all really good, particularly given that Asia is 58% of global emissions. Across the names that have set targets with us, we have, for example, 60% of FTSE 100 as at the end of last year. In terms of US, 201 of the S&P 500. So some of the largest companies have managed to set targets with SBTi. But there is much to be done. If you are following the UNFCCC conference in Bonn last week, the scientists who write the IPCC reports published the latest findings, and essentially where we are is that they are finding that the remaining carbon budget for 1.5 is being depleted at an alarmingly fast rate, which means that the corporate and the broader societies must double down and take really ambitious action now in order to affect change. And I was at a session the other day, and we had Al Gore present, and he mentioned something very interesting, and I checked it up, and it's apparently correct. And that is the amount of global heating arising from the increased carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases is equivalent to the heating of the 750,000 atomic bombs per day, or 8.7 Hiroshima bombs every second. So that's why we must really dabble down. So kind of no pressure, but turning to our wonderful panel, we have, of course, David Schofield, who's head of sustainability and at Aviva, and chairman of the UNGC UK. We have Mariam Omi, who's CEO of Climate Arc, who released Transition Arc in this very room last year, this time, which was amazing. And we have Jill Lindhorst, who is the head of climate at ING. And soon we will be joined by Denise as she walks through the room. Hi, Denise. This is fantastic. I've never seen better timing than this. Needs a round of applause. Cannot be better timing from Paris to London. Just on time. Who's the head of ESG at PAI, which is one of the largest European private equity houses. So we'll just give you a moment to catch your breath. So
literally catch my breath.
Yeah, so kind of turn to the panel. If you mind, David, give us an introduction about Aviva, that everybody knows. I mean, most people do, but just in case. And also set out your SBTi journey. Why did you set your targets? Where are you currently with your, delivering your transition plans?
Yeah, thank you. I might start with the UNGC point, actually. So I'll try and wear the UNGC hat and the Aviva hat. We've seen a huge groundswell of engagement amongst our members in science-based target setting. It's one of our most popular. We're talking like thousands of people on webinars on how do you get this stuff done. So it's hugely helpful, and actually our biggest constituent sector in the UK network is financial services. So I can speak a little bit from that perspective. From Aviva's perspective, you might know our CEO, Amanda Blanc, who then went on to co-chair the Transition Plan Task Force as well, very engaged in this. But when she came in, she wanted Aviva to be a business that was going to win. So she set up a new corporate strategy, and sustainability was part of that, but not like the exotic pet in the corner. But actually a key part of the rest of the strategy, because it drives across efficiency, improving customer outcomes and driving growth. So for us, it's always been sort of cited within the overall corporate strategy. I think we were quite clear in our comms, and communicating about this stuff is one of the tricks, particularly now when it is so tricky. But being able to say, we haven't got perfect clarity on this yet, but if we wait till we've got that, it will be too late. So we're starting. And we set out an ambition to be net zero by 2040. That's punchy. We've just done our second transition plan, and I have to say, we have a brilliant climate-specific team. So Leah and our Climate Centre of Expertise work on this, and laying out that transition plan we found to be a fantastic framing. So you're not just having like an atomized conversation about targets, but you're talking about the importance of the transition, the material importance of the transition through a kind of double materiality lens to the business. And then within that context, you of course can reach for this fantastic tool of SBTi targets. I'd finally echo some of the comments from the previous panel. I mean, finance is not some mysterious black box. It's a business like any other. So actually for us, embedding this in business planning, extending the business planning timeline beyond the typical 3 years out to 2030, and even it's pretty bizarre to be business planning out to 2040, but bringing that discipline through, and then actually using the muscles of the business itself. So for us, the involvement of people in business transformation, I think you heard that on the previous panel, it's not just about the climate scientists, it's that core muscle around business transformation and the funding flows that help us do the business change to line up to those targets. That was our journey.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Jill, as one of the 29 globally systemically important banks, and the first one of those to set science-based targets, would you kind of describe your journey to set targets and how you're kind of progressing on transition plans?
Yeah, thanks, Pender. Yeah, so our target setting journey actually started with setting our ambition. We wanted to play a leading role in accelerating the transition to a low-carbon economy. And getting recognition from SBTi as the first global systemic important bank of our targets being validated and being in line with science was really also a key moment for us and a key recognition for our leadership. And but of course it comes down to not setting targets but also taking action, and that's where the transition plan plays a really key role. And in our transition plan, which is actually also now required by our regulator to have these transition plans in place, both from the risk side as from the opportunity side. We focus a lot on the clients we finance, of course. We have many hard-to-abate sectors in our portfolio. And we started to collect the transition plans of those clients. So 2,000 of our largest clients, we have collected their data in a tool, and the key account managers, so the relationship managers, are owning this data. And we have trained them to speak with our clients on their transition. And we monitor the progress of those clients. And we ask also questions like, what are your emissions over historic emissions? What are your targets? Have you set science-based targets? What are your actions, and how is your governance? And we take this type of data really at the heart of our organization to help our clients to bring down emissions, to help them finance new technology, infrastructure, to enable the transition to a low carbon economy.
Perfect, thank you. So Dennis, I hope that you've caught your breath a little bit. Excellent. It would be great to hear about your journey at PAI in terms of SBTi and setting transition plans to deliver your ambition.
Very well. Well, good morning, everyone. To start off, just at PAI, what I do is I lead sustainability transformation for the portfolio. Our portfolio essentially has companies such as, Frenary, which does ice cream, so Häagen-Dazs, you can think about Drumstick, Extreme, but quite varied, and this is important because decarbonization journeys are different. So everything like that to, for example, Interflora, Tropicana Juice, etc. And we're full buyout, full control private equity firm. So the moment of clarity for us, I would say, came in various board meetings and various meetings with management where we realized we weren't only talking about reducing emissions, we're talking about competitive advantage. That was when the penny dropped. And I'd say that from our commitment, essentially what we're doing in terms of the delivery, because as a private equity firm, our commitment is a target of targets. So we've committed to 42% of our invested capital, so the companies that we own and run, having their own targets by 2029. Because this is where the bulk of our emissions are. They're not in the scope 1 and 2, which is the same for most of you, I imagine. In terms of delivery, how do we intend to do this? I've already talked about how different our companies are. And there are 3 ways, I'd say. The first is internally. So we essentially have created, and I believe we were the first PE firm to do this, an internal carbon pricing mechanism. And so for every company that we are looking at buying, during due diligence, we are now contemplating, analyzing carbon as a potential liability. And so we're costing out what it would take to decarbonize those companies even before purchase. From acquisition, which is the second lever, we are, I would use the word, empowering portfolio companies towards this goal. And of course, empowering, you ought to bring them along in a way by offering what can help. And this is the third lever, which I would say is the expertise. So we are offering support to myself and my team, working with the CEOs and the management teams, investment teams, to bring to them either internally or externally the technical know-how and the access to financing, et cetera, that it would take to make this happen. I think just to reiterate, the breakthrough has been value creation. The recognition that companies that are mature carbon-wise are more resilient, they're more efficient, and more competitive. And what that actually means in practice is that we will have companies that essentially have greater access to capital, more appeal to attract the right talent, and more competitive.
Interesting. So potential impact on valuations if you consider carbon as a contingent liability. So it makes the acquisition discussions quite interesting.
It's a very different conversation because it's not only what's good for the planet, this is the future. And that's what future-proofing is for us, because you're preparing those companies for exit.
Excellent, thank you. Mariam, turning to you as an ecosystem super connector and data integrator within the ecosystem, how is Climate Arc kind of supporting the broader decarbonization journey of financial institutions and the broader economy?
Thanks, Bender. So my background is also investment management, so engaging with hundreds of companies globally in different jurisdictions, different sectors. I could see that the money was moving, but it wasn't moving fast enough and it wasn't being localized enough. So Climate Arc was really driven out of that, arguably a frustration, to see the action on the ground. So I love the word super connector. Thank you so much. We're going to use that. But we are really trying to understand what transitions are happening. And as we heard from the last panel, the transitions are messy. It's not a straight line, even if science says so. And we need to capture this information. And the companies that are moving in the right direction have to attract more favorable capital. So we want to build that tool to help all the financial decision makers, whether it be the CFO of corporates or their financiers, whether it be banks, insurance, or investors, to have that information to move forward the transition that is messy, that's murky, it's a different shades of green, and then move us forward in terms of how to actually decide action on money, which is where things happen. So that's what we are trying to do with a tool that we launched last year called Transition Arc. But everything is done in partnership with partners like Science Based Targets. So we have been fortunate enough to also fund Science Based Targets, a financial institution methodology framework. And so hopefully we're going to see a lot more of kind of action points for financial institutions. Particularly in our case, we funded the underwriting part of insurance, which is a really underserved part of the financial decision-making process.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. And as David mentioned earlier on, the financial institutions net zero standard, hopefully we should be coming out in the coming weeks. So that's out there in the open as well. So kind of turning to I mean, we have a very good representation across different actors, types of actors within the financial institution space. SBTi speak for financial services industry. There are, you know, what have been the kind of the big successes, given that most of your inventories are emission inventories actually in scope 3 category 15. So David, if I may turn to you and say, where have you found the kind of the best successes in delivering emission reduction?
I mean, again, from an SBTi perspective on the UNGC level, I think people are really finding the tool useful in terms of expanding the portfolio coverage, so going beyond the more straightforward asset classes and expanding that, and using the temperature rating tools. Sector-specific pathways as well is really helpful from an investor perspective. I really like the point around, actually, it's sector-specific and often business-specific, the journeys people can take. So it's been a lot to do with engagement, as we've heard. I mean, definitely we're a believer that, you know, divestment isn't, you know, a particularly effective lever in most cases. That engagement is really important. We've managed to beat our asset owner reliance targets. We've seen carbon intensity come down in some areas by 64% so far already, which is great progress. But it's a very similar position to the previous panel. You know, we're doing a lot of the easy stuff, which is why there's a lot more emphasis around policy advocacy and trying to solutionize for the real economy. So where might we need to place investment to increase innovation that are going to drive real economy changes? Because we're all so contingent on the lack of pace of transformation in the real economy. Like an insurance business, we have, like some of the other brands, huge supply chains. You know, you can't get a good value, lower carbon windshield at the moment. And until we can, it's difficult to price that in for a market that's very commodified. So there's some of the kind of real challenges that you're facing into. So I think it's a real mixture between engagement, going at what you can go at now, and then working smart and collaboratively on policy and advocacy, and sort of powering up the kind of innovation that we're going to need in the real economy.
So ecosystem collaboration and public advocacy, that's the key thing. And Gilles, if I may turn to you, what have you found kind of biggest successes in driving down your portfolio emissions?
Yeah, related to portfolio emissions, of course, the large part of that comes from our lending book related to the energy sector. And that's where we have set up really huge policies, you could say. First of all, of course, coal. We stopped financing coal, and we run out of coal by the end of this year, so it's out of our book. The other one is we have set up the target to phase out upstream oil and gas by 2040. So that's also a major milestone for us. It's 10, 20 years beyond what science tells us, so we're moving faster with upstream oil and gas out of our portfolio. But of course, driving down those fossil fuels, we need to also build up a sustainable future. So we have been also extending our commitment to finance renewables. So we have been tripling our renewable energy finance. And last year we financed over 7 billion in that year for renewable energy. So yeah, those are really key successes in bringing down emissions, but also building up a sustainable future.
So the energy sector has been the one that has, for now, has been the kind of the low-hanging fruit, or rather one of the early things to drive the portfolio emission reduction, which is great. And Denise, from your perspective, you deliver through your companies that you own. What have been the successes there?
There have been quite a few, actually, and I would say that, again, the case studies are the ones that also make money, right? So three come to mind, and I'll be quick about them. So the first one, we own a company called Yonderland, and it has brands. It's a retail outlet for outdoor adventure. And they invested 4.5 million over 3 years in energy efficiency initiatives across stores. That one investment essentially has brought about annual savings of 2 million each year. In other companies, so we own another company called EMG, which is a broadcast media company that does everything from UEFA, FIFA, to royal weddings and Eurovision. And they moved live broadcasting remote. It's like magic, actually, if you see this. And just by doing that, they have reduced, of course, the logistics, accommodation, bringing the people on site that would normally be, working on the AV, etc. And through that, they have reduced around 7,000 metric tons of CO2. And to put that in perspective, of course, an average passenger car is 7 metric tons, so you can do the maths there. But EMG has done great, and these are stories that the boards like to hear. CFOs like these stories, banks like the stories, so those are success. I would say a biggest one for me is a company we own called SBTi Pharma, and it's the world's probably one of the largest makers of pharma glass. I don't know if you've seen glass being made, but I was at the factory a couple of weeks ago, and you can't take your eyes off it. The amount of heat you need to create glass is phenomenal. And of course, it's a hard-to-abate sector. So SBTi are doing 3 things. One, they're being really innovative around lightweight glass. But of course, who wants to have lightweight vials that break for cancer medication, etc.? The quality remains the most important thing. And so recycled content is pretty limited for this reason, regulation-wise, which sometimes doesn't work with decarbonization. But by just including 10% of recycled content, they can reduce 60% of emissions, which is pretty remarkable. And then the third layer, which is the most exciting, is the hybrid furnaces. So they're moving from gas to electricity, or a mix of, and hydrogen they're trialing out as well. And the results have been phenomenal there as well. So that I would say have been really good examples of companies have chosen SBTi for the rigor and of course for the credibility.
It sounds like figuring out where energy efficiency can be found and actually making the investment case and actually doing the investment and then benefiting from the kind of all the savings that come from that. So it's good business sense. Now turning to challenges. And David, I don't know if you want to wear a UNGC hat or the kind of Aviva hat, but what have been the biggest challenges that you see in delivering portfolio emission reduction?
I'll probably go back to a couple of points already raised. So the data point is absolutely critical, that availability of quality data. We're all contingent on that. And those real economy shifts where the kind of stability in a policy environment that can give investors' confidence to invest is so important, and hopefully we're seeing more of that now. I think from a UNGC perspective, deciphering the signal from the noise. There's obviously a lot of sort of cultural noise around this space, but the signal we've heard is quite clear. We actually had our AGM last week, and we heard business leader after business leader say the material issue, the underlying reality, which is why science is so important, science-based targets, has not changed. And actually the challenge isn't even necessarily a cultural challenge, it's more a cost of living, stagnant growth, inflation. That's the kind of challenge. So finding the ways to make this good for business, as well as just the moral case, is really, really important. There's some stats that you could play either way. So I think we've got just over 50% of our suppliers now signed up to science-based targets. You could say that's glass half empty, but I think actually that's glass half full, and you've heard a lot of us talk about these targets where we are seeing movement. There's some other spaces actually, and it's not always the obvious ones. So if I look at where we see most crystallization of sort of consumer demand, it's in interesting places. So like for us, workplace pensions is a really interesting one. So where you've got in the UK, everyone has to pay into a pension through their employer. There are really simple things you can do to look at defaults on those funds, bringing choices to people. And when a pension trustee walks out onto the shop floor and says to their employees, do you care about this stuff? We all know from our data it's still between 2/3 and 3/4. The majority of people do want businesses to act on this if we can make it simple and easy for them. So I know we haven't hit tipping point on that yet, but I think it's really interesting where you see some crystallization of that demand. And interestingly, business to business rather than B2C is often where we've seen some of the early signs of that. And therein lies, of course, for people who have put their head above the parapet, have set targets, therein lies some competitive advantage.
Just before we just kind of all talk about kind of challenges, Mariam, I just want to break this up a little bit and just get your perspectives on the successes that you have seen when you look across the financial services industry.
Well, there's been a lot of successes, as you have highlighted, you know, I think one of the things that I saw when I was 2018, I was talking to UBS, and there was a picture of a house, and it had a solar panel on top, and it was plugged into electric car. And I said to UBS, is that possible by 2025? And they said, absolutely, technology is there. If the price comes down at the rate that it is now, it's possible. Now, you can argue whether it's happened or not. Maybe your house doesn't have that. But I think it's very possible today, and I think there are a lot of financing that has gone into those solutions. And my mother is Moroccan, she lives in Morocco, she doesn't have that yet, but this concept is not new, and they are thinking about decentralized energy solutions and thinking about electric car as a cheaper option to run. And so I think there are a lot of successes that have happened in place that we probably haven't accounted for. But I actually have a longer list for challenges, so I'll come back to you on that one.
So we've taken a breath, but that sounds like increasing investment in transition finance and climate solutions is driving down per unit cost, and that is kind of is a reinforcing circle in a way. So kind of going back to challenges again, Jill, your perspectives on what is kind of difficult to decarbonize lending portfolios in particular.
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, next to long-term, robust governmental policies, that should be clear here, and also data challenges, I want to highlight the challenge of upskilling the organization. We are a really global bank with 60,000 colleagues. So bringing 60,000 colleagues along in this journey is really a complex exercise. And you need top leadership commitment for that, but you need to also have all types of training tools, training platforms to bring them along. And they need to tell also their story, this story we have, to their clients. So yeah, we invested a lot in upscaling our organization to bring our story across to our clients and to the outside world.
Right, so it sounds like it's a whole of organization change that needs to involve all of the employee base, because everybody kind of touches the kind of emission reduction in some way, in their own way. So kind of, Mariam, but going back to you and your perspectives on the challenges now. You said you had a lot.
A long list. I'm going to try to reduce it, but I think it just speaks to a lot of the pain points that we heard just now, but also in the previous panels. I think just speaking to targets, which is obviously what this is about. When you set a target, and then obviously 3 years later you're reporting on it, a lot of underlying assumptions change. And we haven't quite built a really good tool on that. So obviously the carbon budget would have changed, in terms of your business would have changed, the benchmark would have changed. And so we are literally cobbling billions of data to think about what that target kind of accountability mechanism should look like. And also what we heard is that your actual result doesn't come in GHG units. It comes in the capital. It comes in the units of products that you've sold. How do we translate the things that happen in the world which doesn't happen in emissions units into emissions impact? Again, without just drawing a kind of arbitrary line on that. So that's really important. We are capturing informations like capital expenditure, product, the solutions that you've created, how you really impacted your supply chains and your value chains overall, and then really have a holistic view of what have you done, what has transitioned, and again, back to my point, should you be attracting better financial terms because of the actions that you've taken, not just because you're in the tent.
Right, okay. So I'm going to kind of change gears a little bit. 62% of global emissions come from 23 emerging markets. And a lot of the actions that we talk about is in the UK or EU, and maybe North America, but kind of looking more globally, how do we need to kind of drive down? What is it that the financial services industry can do to move the needle in emission reduction in emerging markets? And just to see the answer, I'm going to open it up to the panel, is that when we ask companies, why do you come and set science-based targets with us? We find that 69% of the people say that it's because our customers are asking us, and 25% say it's because our investors are requiring us to set targets. So I'm just going to open it up.
I can have a go. Before I joined PAI, I spent 12 years at the World Bank. Very fortunate to have helped structure the world's first $1 billion green bond. And what I'll say is that in the developing world, things need to make economic sense now. And we've seen that happen around solar, for example, where you can, you go to a manufacturer in Vietnam or Bangladesh, and they already, if they could, had solar, or in Africa, where it's more reliable than the grid there, and also cheaper. In terms of the credit profiles, these are not businesses that can access green bonds, right? Very different credit profile to a German manufacturer. What I do think is important is the opportunities and alternatives such as blended finance. So there will always be a role, at least there should be right now anyway, for DFIs and the likes of MDBs, in spite of all that's going on now, to work with the private sector to meet the needs of EM.
And David, from a kind of an asset, an investment manager and asset owner and a insurance underwriter, what's your perspective?
I mean, Aviva's exposure is not huge in this space, but certainly when we're thinking from that UNGC perspective with all those different companies, there's a lot of talk about global policy coherence, which we were talking about there. That's so important, that ability to bring the right bits of public sector financing to de-risk the private sector finance flows, localized, credible target setting, so that then you can have those tracking mechanisms to make sure that these are actually sustainable, hopefully, growing financial flows. If we can prove the value add, both from the climate side and the local and immediate development priorities. I think we should also be talking about resilience and adaptation here. Realistically, this is not just about mitigation. If we're talking about now, we should also be talking about how we unlock flows into adaptation and resilience too.
Okay, fantastic. So we're coming towards the end of the panel, but I would like you to go around the panel, person at a time. What is your one takeaway that you would like to leave the audience with? Denise. No pressure.
Value creation. I think that because we're so myopic generally as a society, people are only thinking about this evening. And I think if you bring an opportunity, people will say yes if it makes sense. And the incentives for management teams and boards is returns. So it needs to make economic sense. And so that talent part is really important. And I would say that's a major challenge, is having people who have the technical expertise in sustainability and commercial to be able to convey this message in the right way to the banks and the boards that are making decisions.
Business value creation and economic sense. All right, David?
Use your transition plan to build the capability and galvanize the whole organization from board to customer-facing staff. It's a massive opportunity. And the journey is often iterative and squiggly, but momentum really matters, which is why I think I love when we get together, as many of us will be sustainability professionals, that we're talking with our head and our heart. We should be heartened by the progress and make sure we keep the momentum.
Ma'am, I'm going to come to you last for your reflections. But Jill, from a bank's perspective?
Yeah, my message would be finance is your friends. Let's work together to decarbonize your footprint.
So you're looking for customers here. So you know what you should do in the breakout session. And Miriam, your final reflections?
I would say targets are set for you because it's science. So we have the tools to assess almost every business, including financial institutions, on how they're doing against scientific baseline. We're also trying to make it localized in different countries. This is where we are now. And we have the tools, we have the data now. It's not perfect, but we have enough to get on. So the question to you is, are you just going to be assessed silently, or are you going to join a group that helps you with the action every day?
So we hear the data challenge all the time. So the answer here is that it's there, look for it, and start to use it, and it'll improve over time.
It's upstairs in the main room. Transition now, have a look.
Excellent, fantastic. Well, thank you very much indeed for your wonderful insights, and it's been great. And we look forward to, I'm sure, the audience mingling with you in the breakouts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pendar, and Denise, and David, and Jill, and Miriam. That was fabulous. The great thing about starting late was that Denise was able to join us. The bad thing is that we're way behind time. So 2 more things for you. Next up, we have a brief video from someone that doesn't need an introduction, so he gets a very brief one. No stranger to us, a brilliant business leader, investor, and philanthropist, Paul Pullman, is going to share some thoughts, and then we're going to hear some reflections again from David. So it's my last time standing here. Thank you all very much for your attention and your support, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Climate Week. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. 10 years ago, the idea that thousands of companies would align their strategies with climate science was still a very bold ambition. Today, it has become a powerful movement. So first, let me say congratulations to the Science Based Target Initiative and to all of you who've helped make this possible. You're not just responding to the science, you're actually redefining what it means to lead. But let's be honest, we're in a moment where that leadership is really being tested. Many businesses made bold net zero pledges when the political winds were behind us. The economy was strong and climate action actually felt less controversial. But now under pressure, be it political, economic or social, we're seeing frankly too many starting to wobble. Some were perhaps not that committed in the first place. Others are giving in to short-term pressure. And still too many, I believe, seem to be lacking the courage that is really needed right now. This is the very moment that leadership matters most. Now, leadership is not just about polished pledges. It's about delivery, especially when the science is clear, but the path is uncertain and the stakes are high. Now, what excites me the most right now is not just the success stories from those leading, and actually the ones increasingly getting rewarded for that leadership. But what excites me the most is the increasing conviction, humility, and willingness I see from those willing to lead with long-term courage, despite the many pressures trying to pull us in the opposite directions. In fact, we are the first generation to fully understand the consequences of our actions, and also the last that can still do something about it. There are about 8 billion plus people here now deciding the fate of hundreds of billions of people to come. Now that gives us both a burden and a gift. The burden of urgency and the gift of agency. Driving the systems changes needed is not just an option, it is the only option. And those who recognize this early once more, who invest not just in innovation, but in the invisible wiring of a better system, will not only build more enduring companies, they will also actively shape the next economy that we need. So I ask you, whether you're a CEO, CSO, a financial leader, or any other for that matter, are you leading for the next quarter or for the next generation? We only have a few business cycles left to deliver on the Paris targets. The clock is indeed ticking. Now, what are you doing to make this happen? That's why I believe that initiatives like the Science Based Target Initiative, although not always perfect, is so vital. In a world of noise and short-term distraction, this work actually grounds us in what often gets left out, the science itself. And here is the truth. Physical climate science doesn't bend to elections, market cycles, or media narratives. The science gives us the guardrails to keep 1.5 degrees alive, even if we temporarily might overshoot. And yes, to keep the Paris Agreement within reach. And every fraction of a degree matters. A 10th-degree increase intensifies heat waves, shrinks crop yields, disrupts supply chains, aggravates water stress, and forces communities to leave their homes. And sadly, millions more, often again once more the most vulnerable, will pay an even higher price with their lives. So to the over 10,000 companies who have committed to the science-based targets, a sincere thank you. You're not just ticking the box, you're building trust, you're future-proofing your businesses, and you're setting an example for others to follow. And yes, you're supporting a world where people can thrive. Now, if you're not there yet, this is actually the moment to step up. There is no more time to watch from the sidelines. And as we move towards the COP30 in Berlin in Brazil, the world will be watching, not just what we promise, but more importantly, what we actually deliver. We all know that progress isn't happening fast enough, and that the acceleration that we desperately need won't come from cautious consensus. History doesn't remember those who waited. It remembers those who led, who reached out across sectors and borders to act, even if it was hard to do. We now need more courageous coalitions from business and finance coming together, not just to decarbonize companies, but to transform entire industries and yes, economies. We need decisive action on fossil fuel phase out, not someday, but starting today. You've heard that 60% of the UK FTSE 100 companies now have validated science-based targets. That is real momentum, but frankly, it's not enough. Today's conversation shows that you have the power and indeed the responsibility to shape not just your own organization, but the future of the planet. So I will simply leave you with these questions. What can you do today? What can you do this week? And what action can you take to deliver on your commitments? Because ambition on its own isn't enough. Action is what will define you. These next few years will separate, frankly, those who deliver from those who delayed. Make sure that your actions put you on the right side of that line. I want to thank you for what you're doing, and please keep leading boldly. The world needs it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so bear with us for about 3 more minutes, and then I'm sure people have got lots of things to go off to. I said before, the danger of speaking without notes when you've got declining memory is that you forget things, and then it's terrible getting older, isn't it? The danger of trying to read from your scribbles with declining eyesight is that you can't see it. But there's some really important stuff that I've written down, which I'm going to share with you. I'm also going to share a feeling rather than a thought. My feeling is, and it's great to hear from Paul, who's a good friend of the organization, my feeling is of being inspired. Just hearing again and again that golden thread from ambition to action. So this is not a fairy tale that isn't happening in reality. It is a reality, even in challenging times, and that is my takeaway from what we've heard. Some of the things I've written down. So the business case is strong. I said that, but you've heard it from multiple different voices. Nobody has challenged that. The costs of action are less than inaction, and I was pleased to hear that from business, echoes of the Stern Review back in 2006. Denise talked about competitive advantage, value creation, I think Sonia said and brought this to life, well, so the business case turns into energy efficiency, which saves you money. Resource efficiency, she used the example of bottles and lightweighting bottles, saves you money again. Renewables now are very competitive, and investing in those and contracts for those renewables makes economic sense. That was a term that I use a lot, but Denise also used it. It's about attracting talent, I think we heard. It's about keeping your customers, attracting new customers. So business case is strong, that's the first thing. North Star. Companies need a North Star to guide their action, and that's where we come in. So before I joined, I was a partner at EY, building a net zero strategy and transition business, working with corporates, and it kept coming up all the time. EY, SBTi is the gold standard. That was the common phrase. I think we heard here, and it was IKEA, I think, who said, it's the only game in town if you want to be serious about making your commitment and having a target. It gets the whole organization on the journey, and that's what you need. You can't have a CSO on their own driving action in big companies. You've got to have the CSO and ops and the supply chain people and the commercial strategy people and the finance people and the CEO and the board. And having an SBTi target gives everybody something to rally around. That's my experience working with many companies on their transition journey, but I think we heard that as well this morning. The next thing is a question that I had as I was listening to people. So we talked about barriers, and there are internal barriers. So internal transformation is really difficult. Change in any organization is difficult. And this is quite profound change if you're going to transform your business from high carbon to low carbon. How can we help with that as SBTi? And I think that internal transformation is largely for companies to do. We're not going to get involved in the internal mechanics of companies, but the way that we frame our standards can help that transformation because it can make it meaningful and practical. And that's about how do you translate the science into things that companies can do. And we are working increasingly with companies on that. And so we heard from Maersk, for example, who've been very helpful in developing a shipping standard. I don't think that conflicts us. I don't think it captures us. I think it gets us to a place where we translate the science, we stay true to it, but we get something that is practical. That's the win-win that I was talking about of science and commercial viability. We also talked about system barriers as well. And those system barriers can be technology, I think we heard, and they can be policy, was what David from Aviva said. And this question for me, we're not going to be a big policy advocacy organization, but is there something we can do that is on that implementation journey as SBTi? So we don't say, bye, you've set your target, see you in 5 years. Can we keep that relationship going? Can we support that implementation? And can we somehow contribute to the various partners addressing system-level barriers? And the big challenge, actually, in my experience, the big next challenge, energy efficiency, renewables, okay, we're getting on with that stuff. Heat is the big challenge, and heat has got some system challenges, whether it's technology, whether it's getting grid connections, whether it is the relative price of gas versus electricity that make it really difficult to electrify heat, which is what most companies need to do. So question, is there a role for us in those system solutions alongside our other partners in the system? Don't worry, I've nearly finished. You see me turning the page, you might think I've got pages more to go. So two more last points. Miriam, I really liked what she said, that solutions are not in emissions units. They are in actions and things that companies do, whether that is entering PPAs or putting heat pumps in your buildings and your production processes and whatever. And we are moving in the direction of giving options to commit to action-based standards, as well as the CO2 pathways that we've used. We talked about pragmatism. And so Anna said, we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And that's always true. 80-20 is usually a good rule if you want to have profound and very difficult change. Transition is messy. That's what I've written down again from Miriam. Now, how do we, in that context where this is not linear, it's messy, we can't get perfection, but we can get a long way towards it. How do we reflect that in a pragmatic approach that stays true to the science? And I said people get scared that when you talk about pragmatism, you're departing from the science. We're not going to do that. But there is a space where you can be pragmatic and true to the science. And It's tricky to find it, but that is what we will do. So I'll finish there. I'll leave you with that message, which is the business case is strong. We, as SBTi, are instrumental in translating that business case into ambition and action. And our ambition, actually, is what you should be doing in a carbon-constrained world to remain competitive, to generate value, not just in the near term, in the future. That is our role. You know, all companies are full of people who want to do the right thing and make their contribution and whatever, but that isn't enough to motivate the profound actions that we need. It's got to have that business case. It's there. We have an important role. Let's work together to make this happen. Everybody in the room and beyond. I do want us to feel positive because the stories I've heard, as I say, are very inspiring, and that's great in challenging times. I'll just finish by saying thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our hosts of the panels as well, so Anna and Pendar, very good moderation and great discussions that we had there. Thank you to all of you for spending time with us on busy schedules and when you've got lots of alternatives. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as I say, let's keep working together. So thank you very much. I've forgotten something. Thank you to Steve for brilliant comparing of the event.